Hello and welcome to the Weekly Forex Outlook at xm.com. We'll be discussing the upcoming meetings for the Bank of Japan and the ECB, as well as data due out of the US. I'm Maria Bashardis, and joining me to discuss all this is Senior Investment Analyst Marios Hadjikyriacos. So Marios, let's start with Japan. The yen seems to have started the new year on the wrong foot. Can you tell us about the current state of the Japanese economy and how the Bank of Japan's upcoming decision on Tuesday is likely to impact the yen moving forward?
Certainly. Hello, Maria. So look, it's been a horrible start to the year for the yen. It's down 5% against the US dollar just in 3 weeks. That's mostly because we've seen a lot of data lately that suggests the Bank of Japan is likely to delay its plans to exit negative interest rates. So specifically, we've seen inflation coming down, we've seen a very sharp slowdown in wages, and that has convinced investors that the Bank of Japan is probably going to take a longer time to raise interest rates. Now, for a very long time, the market expected the Bank of Japan to end negative interest rates in April, but now the timing of this move has been pushed back to July, and that has dealt a heavy blow to the yen. Now, I think the Bank of Japan is unlikely to rock the boat when it meets on Tuesday. Governor Ueda has already downplayed the prospect of raising interest rates. He's been saying that there's no rush to do so, and the economic data polls has weakened further since he made those comments. So it's likely that the Bank of Japan is going to maintain a cautious stance overall. Now, if they continue signaling no urgency to normalize policy, I think that could be a factor that keeps the yen under pressure.
Moving over to the euro area now, we'll get the ECB decision on Thursday. Are we anticipating any changes there, and what reaction might we see in the euro?
Yeah, so the European Central Bank is not going to do anything, so the action is going to come from what President Lagarde has to say. Now, in recent weeks, Maria, we've seen a lot of ECB officials trying to dampen speculation about imminent rate cuts. So the markets are pricing in a rate cut in April from the ECB. They are assigning an 85% probability for such an action. But we've seen a lot of policymakers lately, including President Lagarde, warning that that's too early, and they've been pointing to a summer rate cut instead. Now, if the European Central Bank emphasizes this message next week, we could see the euro spiking higher maybe as some of those rate cut bets are unwound. But overall, I think the picture for the euro is pretty grim. Economic growth has been stagnant for a long time now. Business surveys are warning about the technical recession in Europe. So even if we see a spike higher on the ECB decision, I think it's going to be difficult for the euro to sustain any advances.
And finally, over in the States, the main event will be the release of the preliminary GDP stats for the fourth quarter on Thursday, followed by the core PCE price index for December on Friday. What should we expect from this data?
Yeah, so US GDP is always a very important event for the markets. Now, the forecast this time is for the US economy to have grown by an annualized rate of 1.8% in the final quarter. Now, if anything, Maria, if there is going to be any surprise, I think that an upside surprise in GDP seems more likely than a disappointment. And I base that on the Atlanta Fed GDP Now model. This is a Fed model that tries to track economic growth in real time. And this model is pointing to a GDP number of 2.4%, which is much higher than the official forecast. Now, this model has a pretty solid track record, and if it proves accurate this time as well, and we see an upside surprise in GDP, the dollar would stand to benefit. Now, last but not least, we also have a policy decision in Canada. So the Bank of Canada is going to meet on Wednesday. I think it's going to be a relatively quiet meeting, but there is a chance that they adopt a slightly more dovish tone. We've seen inflation coming down very substantially in Canada. So perhaps the Bank of Canada might open the door for an easing cycle later this year.
Marios, thanks so much. This was the Weekly Forex Outlook here at xm.com.